everyone, and welcome over to a special episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. I'm joined today by Nate Vance. He is Vice President Vance's cousin, and he is freshly back from Ukraine. Today we're going to be addressing what JD Vance had to say in response to some of the stuff that Nate had actually put out. Nate, can you do me a favor, just tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I mean, you've had 7-minute clips or so on CNN. You've had little clips here and there. You've been quoted in newspaper articles, but you haven't had a chance to actually introduce yourself. Would you mind doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm anything remarkable in any way. You know, I was a normal kid, I guess. Joined the Marines, enlisted when I was like 17, and then went to boot camp right after I turned 18 years old.
What'd you do in the Marines?
Machine gunner.
Nice.
You know, got out, found a job, ended up working in the oil field, and then 20 years later decided I'm going to go to Ukraine. You know, there wasn't like much exciting things in between there, like no major life events. I didn't do anything really super cool or anything like that. And then when the Ukraine thing broke out, I decided to head that way. So I mean, my life story is pretty boring, right? I don't think there's anything really remarkable in there, which is why I don't tend to talk about it that much. I mean, it's
sure, you're a regular human being.
Yeah,
right?
normal.
And I think that's one of the funny things about a lot of this is when you end up in the spotlight or something, people forget that you're an actual person with actual feelings, with an actual life behind everything else. They tend to take things and they'll tend to spin and politicize to the best, imaginable point to drive whatever agenda that they want.
Yeah, turn you into a caricature. So.
Right. What made you decide to go to Ukraine?
I mean, it's more than a single reason.
Okay.
Right. So the first reason, and people don't normally say this, and I think they're kind of lying, not lying, or maybe being dishonest with themselves if they don't admit it, is curiosity. And I don't mean curiosity in the way that like a rubbernecker looks at a wreck on the side of the road, but a lot of historical events take place. This one is pretty major.
Yeah.
Right? This is not even necessarily once in a single lifetime that something this major happens.
Right.
And there was a certain level of curiosity, not to gawk at it, but to really just know what was going on. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's that. Now, curiosity, I think, can get you somewhere, but it's not going to keep you there.
Yeah.
Right? Not for as long as I stayed.
I was going to say, but you did stay there for a while.
That's what I mean. And yeah, and eventually we'll kind of get to that. And then, the curiosity got me there. I saw some things, I mean, everybody's heard of Bucha, right? Like I was there after.
Actually,
that.
not. You would be surprised. Like people like me, people like you.
That's what I mean. Yeah, everybody.
We've heard of Bucha. A lot of Americans haven't heard of Bucha.
Yeah. So I mean, for those.
But we can get there.
Yeah, we can get there, right? But there was some bad things that happened there, and something else. I have a bad temper. Right.
Fair.
So I see things I don't like.
A Marine with a bad temper? No.
Never.
It's impossible.
Never, ever. Right. But so I saw some things that kind of pissed me off.
Sure.
So I it was like, okay, maybe I'll transition from doing humanitarian things to more kinetic things.
Sure.
If the opportunity arises. But I was like, I don't want to just hurl myself into something. So if I find a place that's a good fit, and I don't want to I don't want to rush into anything and do something beyond my capabilities either, right? So you got to be honest with yourself and say, okay, I'm not gonna try to join a special forces unit at 45 years old and 43 at the time, and go do door kicking raids when I'm not qualified to do that. So it's like, normal infantry stuff. That's what I knew, and that's what I would participate in.
You know what's crazy too? Yeah, I spent about half and half of my career an infantry SF guy, and you would think that on the dark side of the house, you end up getting, much more dangerous and everything else. And it is true to an extent, but at least in the United States military, you end up having a lot more support that gets behind it.
Well, that's, yeah.
And I will tell you, as an infantryman, I have been more scared for my life than I ever was when I was SF. It's just how it goes.
Yeah.
It's just how it is. And so there's one of the things that absolutely drives me insane too is when people degrade their own service of different things that they did. No, I wasn't this cool guy. Well,
and that's not what I mean by saying you gotta go where you got to know what your capabilities are. Now, like, could I learn to do what you guys did? I mean, do I have the capacity to like figure out what that is? And
I think everybody does.
Anybody could if they wanted to, bad enough, right? But if I was just to show up and be like,
That's not
just
good.
show up in your team and go into a room, I'm gonna screw your rhythm up,
Yep.
and screw everything up, right? So that's where I was like, no, I don't want to do that, and I'm not here. Anything that I'm doing here, I don't want it to be based on taking from these people. I want it to be contributing, right? So if they're having to teach me skills, that's kind of the opposite.
You're trying to contribute, not
Yes.
be a drain.
Correct.
Yep.
So that's why I was like, well, if I go to a regular infantry unit and start doing support by fire things, like, yeah, I'm pretty good at that stuff. So
Right.
I can teach guys how to do that, and
Yeah.
it's a valuable thing. So
Yeah. So, a bunch of I've done my research on you. I kind of like look back and forth, and I've seen a lot. And one of the common threads that has been kind of like painted in the news is that you and the vice president grew up very close to each other almost. The feel that I get from reading and or watching certain clips, it's true. That's the feel that I got after looking at it. What's your stance on that? Like,
So,
were you guys that close? Because
No.
the way I saw it was more or less, and it made me take back, and it had to take a step back. Like, you guys would go and you spent time together, but you weren't brothers, basically.
correct, yeah. If you hear this is another one of the things too. Like some of the European countries, like Ukraine's one of them. They don't have like a separate word for cousin. It's just brother, right? So the direct translation of it would come out to be brother. So sometimes you see that, and I think that's just a mistranslation thing. But yeah, no, we were. They lived in Ohio, right, Middletown, Ohio, and then I was born in Texas. We moved around a little bit when I was a kid, but it was like Chicago, California, and Texas, and a lot of summers we would spend in Ohio, and I think one summer when I was in high school, JD and his sister came out to California and stayed with us. But it was mainly like summers and then maybe holidays or something like that.
Okay.
But close, but not calling every day. Like we didn't even have cell phones back then, so we couldn't.
Right. Like you actually had to remember phone numbers, or
yeah.
write them down. Yeah.
So close. There's no hostility or anything like that either, right? It's just, and then me, I'm not very communicative anyway, so I'm not one of those guys that's like, I don't even call my friends that often, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I'm like that guy that I like.
So if I was to ask you a question, like when was the last time you spoke to him? Was it before you went to Ukraine?
Oh yeah, I don't even remember
Like
it.
how long before?
I don't even remember the exact time.
Yeah,
but,
right?
You know what I mean?
And things have context.
But yeah.
Things have context, and when I see things that are painted inside of a news article, or when I see things that are painted inside mainstream media, and it says, hey, he attempted to reach out to him. You tried, but he didn't get back to you.
Well, and
when I see things like that, it really starts to irk me, right?
Well, and I tried to clarify that, right?
I saw it.
So that reaching out thing now, and again, people misunderstand things and misinterpret things, and that's a human trait, and I'm not free of, you know what I mean? I'm not innocent of misunderstanding.
We're people,
things
we
too.
make mistakes, right?
So it was very early in the conflict. I had gone to Ukraine. I came home for like a couple of weeks. There was something, it was basically, I was trying to contact him to see if I could get his help with something at the State Department.
Fair.
Right? Because you can't contact anybody at the State Department because it's a bureaucratic nightmare, right? And like he had mentioned, he was like, why didn't you call your parents? So if I called my parents and asked for your cell phone number, they'd be like, why? We know where you were, why do you want it? And then I'd have to tell them. And my mother has a heart attack if I drive my car at night, still in my 40s, right? Like, so.
So you're people, right? Is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Like you're human beings with a lot. Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like I didn't want to involve my parents in any aspect of what I was doing over there.
That's reasonable.
And it's not, like any of it.
that's reasonable.
So that's why I was trying to kind of do the end around and call his office and see if I could get in touch with him that way.
Perfect. So you called his office?
Yeah.
And you probably spoke to a staffer or somebody.
I spoke to a staffer, and then
Exactly.
and they probably thought I was a crackhead claiming to be his family.
Probably thought you were a crackhead claiming to be his family because JD's probably looking there and going.
Well, and that's why,
Right.
that's why I was like trying to clarify. And then after that, and this is where the misunderstanding on my part comes in, is based on some of his statements. I'm like, I don't think he would help anyway, right? So I was like, well, I'm not going to continue to try to bother him. And then once I was back in Ukraine, there's no way to make like a GSM phone call that the FSB is not listening to.
Correct.
So there's just, once I'm over there, I'm like, I can't contact him anyway, right? There's no way.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a lot more of that stuff here in a little bit, and we're going to get there, but that's just one of those things I think is super important that we need to kind of start nipping in the butt, because the way it's been pictured to me in the media is that he blew you off.
No,
and that you made a huge effort to get to him, and he never got back to you.
Yeah, I was really trying to clarify that. I know exactly where
we're going to talk about it.
Where you're talking about, you know what I mean? And I was really trying to clarify that that's not exactly the case, right?
Let's put it this way. You were a Marine. What's your job in the Marine Corps?
Smash things.
Break shit and
Eat
kill
crayons.
people. And eat crayons. Break shit, kill people, eat crayons, right? Like, that's your job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's really what it is. And you ever had training in media?
No. I've been a manager. Like, this is the thing. I got to own my own bullshit. Well, I got to own my own BS.
Sure.
So, if we'll get to it.
Yeah, we're going to get to it, right? Don't worry about it. We're going to get to it, right? I want to talk to you a little bit about your time in Ukraine before we get to it, because context is important and context matters. And I think where mainstream media has failed you is providing the context behind everything, because everybody's got an agenda. Everybody's got an agenda. They really do. And when I look at certain news organizations, right, they tend to lean to one side or the other. So if they're able to get you on and throw out certain words, it's going to fit their agenda.
I know.
Without providing any context. So when we get into it, we know, generally speaking, why you went to Ukraine.
Yeah.
When did you get to Ukraine?
March of 2022, so almost 3 years to the day, to right now.
March of 2022, so you were there almost 3 years. And when did you leave?
January, just about 40 days ago. So well, just before the inauguration, so I guess maybe over 50. So.
And I talked to you about it a little bit earlier, but I think it's important people understand why you left. Would you mind telling them why you left? Before we even get into everything that you experienced, why you chose to leave?
Well, and this is, I don't know if people quite understand the security scenario over there, but it's not, they're right on the border with their own bad guys, right? So there's people that are there that shouldn't be there, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they're kind of hard to identify sometimes, so, me being there, it's a matter of time before people figured out who I was.
Correct.
And at some point I would be a target, potentially, right? I think it would be a very dumb thing to do for somebody to do that, but you never know. You can't put anything past anybody. So in an effort to prevent the United States and this new administration from being put in a very awkward position if something did happen to me, I decided to take a step back.
Right, and we're going to talk about where you're at and why it was important for you to take a step back. And you just said it in a very political way of why you took a step back. Yeah. Right, but the bottom line is, what would the Russians have done if they got their hands on you?
Oh, I'd be underneath some building in St. Petersburg or Moscow, and I would never be seen again. And
I think you would be seen again on a camera.
Or the United States would have to make a lot of concessions to get me back, which is putting somebody in an awkward position where he's now got to negotiate for a family member. And I wouldn't even want.
Who is that person?
No, my cousin,
the Vice President of the United States of America.
Yeah.
Right?
So it was. I mean, there's other reasons. Like genuinely, I'd been gone almost 3 years.
Sure.
I had stuff to do, so I had stuff to take care of back home. But that was the primary reason. It didn't make sense. At a point, it's like, yeah, I want to stay here. I want to continue trying to get the things accomplished that I'm trying to get accomplished. But it's not just about what I want.
Right.
So.
Totally agree with you. You had said that you were on the front. You were obviously there for 3 years. You were serving in, a frontline capacity while you were over there. And I think it's important for people to understand what that means to serve in that frontline capacity, because it provides that context for the next thing that we're about to talk about.
Okay.
So that frontline context, you named Kupiansk earlier. Or I'm sorry, you named Bucha earlier. I threw Kupiansk.
Well, yeah, it's
That was from a
another
different
fun
conversation
place.
you were having.
Yeah.
But you named Bucha earlier. Were you in Bucha?
Not during, there was no, not during any of the fighting or like relief of it. We came in afterwards and kind of saw the aftermath of.
What did you see in Bucha? Did you see the mass graves?
Yes, and things involving children. So, children, elderly, people locked in basements, having to like urinate and defecate on themselves, and just I know there's inhumane things that happen all over the world over and over again, but
It's different.
it's different when you look somebody when you see it,
Yeah.
and you look somebody in the eye, right?
Right.
So it makes you mad.
When I was talking to you earlier, you had mentioned that you were in Kupiansk. I'm not trying to draw bad memories, but I think it is important for context. And there's, in my opinion, a lot of us veterans, we don't talk about enough stuff. And I'm going to tell some of my stories. And we're going to go back and forth here for a sec, like in a little bit, because it matters.
Yeah.
It does matter. You said you were in Kupiansk. You told me that, if I remember correctly, right? Can you describe what that area was like and what happened?
I mean, it was some days were pretty normal, like, just normal infantry stuff. That's a bad memory place for me. That was like one of the worst days was in Kupiansk.
Without specifics, why? You don't have to be specific.
It was like, we lost quite a few guys that I was close to that day, so.
Friends.
Yeah.
People that you knew.
Yes.
People that you slept next to.
Yes.
People that you shared food with.
Yeah, people whose kids I played with and whose wives I met, you know what I mean? Things like that.
People that you would consider a brother.
Yes.
People that you loved and cared about.
Yes.
You also went a couple other places as well, didn't you?
Yeah, Bakhmut, Vuhledar.
So, Bakhmut, let's touch on that for a minute because, again, you were like, everybody knows about Bucha. Welcome to America.
Yeah.
People right now, they look at, like, I'm assuming you've seen updated photos of everything that's taking place over in Gaza.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that even hold a candle to Bakhmut?
I mean, I don't think so. I don't know. I mean,
It's not even close.
Bakhmut was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. And then, that's like the first time when we went there. That's the first time I was like, you watch like old World War II movies, and that was the first time. Like, remember in Full Metal Jacket?
Which scene?
When Cowboy was like, "This is like a war."
Oh yeah.
This is like what a war really.
Yeah.
That's what I was like kind of mentally replaying that scene in my head a few times at Bakhmut.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time we pulled up to that city too. It was at night, and we were on the outskirts of it, and there was fog and smoke, and there was so much like fire going on in the city, and we were at the outskirts, like on a trench overlooking it, on a hill overlooking the city. And it looked like Mordor from Lord of the Rings. Like, it was terrifying, right? And it was just a freaky scene, and that'll kind of get your attention real quick, right? Like when you see that, you're like, oh, what did I do? What did I do, right?
Yeah.
So, and then we lost a few guys there too.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, it's part of it.
It's war, right? And it sucks.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that takes away from it,
There was I think I did a pretty good job of like compartmentalizing things, and you have to, right? You got to do it. And then there was one time, me and a Ukrainian guy, we went to Kyiv, and we met with this woman and her friend, and the woman was the wife of a guy that had been killed, and we couldn't retrieve his body, right? And I actually hadn't met her yet, but she had her little 2-year-old, like little baby daughter with her. And I'm sitting there as the English-speaking, like fifth wheel. I have no idea really what they're talking about. But I knew that she was like still fairly convinced that he might be alive, right? And no, right? We knew, but you can't take her hope away, right? And they were having a conversation. It was the first time I had actually met her in person, sitting in this little coffee shop. And I remember looking at her face, and you could see in her eyes that it was just despair, just desperate for something, some like hope that he was going to come back. And I think that was the first time that I kind of fucked up. Well, sorry.
You good, man?
But
That's fine.
Screwed up my compartmentalization routine, because that broke my heart, seeing her like that.
Yeah.
Like, I could deal with.
There's some things you don't forget.
If me and you go somewhere and bad stuff happens, it's like we both agree. Like, we know this is going to happen. We know this is a possibility. But seeing her like that was pretty
There's
rough.
some things I don't forget, man. And like, there's one wife in particular, and like the way she was crying, that haunts me to this day.
Yeah, and it just that was one of those things that was just kind of gut wrenching watching that, and you feel helpless.
You are.
Yeah, you can't do anything.
And that, like, I try to explain this, like, I have lost my fair share of friends at war, and my mom died 3 years ago now, and I kind of felt like a POS because I was like the only dry-eyed family member at her memorial before we took her to the cemetery.
Yeah.
That hurt less to me than some of the people that I had lost overseas. Some of my friends and brothers, and like that hurt more to me, like the people that I had lost. There's something specific about it that you don't get, like there's no other way to explain that to anybody that's never been there. Why
I'm not articulate enough.
I'm sorry?
I'm not articulate enough to explain it.
Nobody can explain it. It's something that you can't. And it's really hard. And it's why movies like Band of Brothers, or it's not even a movie, miniseries.
Yeah.
Things like Band of Brothers try to do it. Saving Private Ryan tried to do a very good job articulating things of that nature, right? Like, but it doesn't, when it's real and you're talking to family members, or when you sit there and you see your friend, and you know that they're about to get it, that's always what was good. I don't want to get that deep into it, man, but...
I don't either.
Thanks. Appreciate you bringing me back on track, right? Joe Biden eventually was getting support into Ukraine.
Some.
How do you feel that went, even when it was at its peak?
I mean, I'm not a mathematician, right? But I do know the cost of things. I did manage a company that moves a lot of, logistically moves a lot of things.
Sure.
Kind of know how much, I kind of have a fairly good sense of how much it costs to move things, and how much things cost. And I'm like, if you take all of those appropriate, I don't know what the actual number is. It keeps changing. It was 100 billion, then 180,
it
and then
depends
500.
on who wants to draw an estimate and what value they put on things. What could I have sold this for? What does this go?
From what I recall, that Congress and Senate voted on, it was roughly $60 billion, allocations of money. That's $180 billion roughly, right?
Okay.
If you gave me $180 billion and told me to go on a shopping spree, I'd have the Russian army east of the Volga River right now.
I know some people I could talk to right now.
You know what I mean? That I don't know how that much money gets spent. And
well, that's what Doge is for currently.
They're
taking care of those things.
Yeah, like right. where did that go? And there was like one Republican congressman when they were voting on one of the things, and I agreed with him. He's like, we're about to spend $60 billion to send $20 billion worth of aid to Ukraine, and it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
I can't remember who he was, so I apologize to whoever that is. I'd like to give you credit. Because it's accurate.
Because it's accurate.
Yeah, it's accurate. And he's telling the truth, and it doesn't make sense, right? But, on the other hand, when you're in the middle of a fight, you're grateful for whatever does show up.
Right.
So,
So back here in the States and everything that was going on when you were over there, what it sounds like is the U.S., like if you were to listen to mainstream media, it would be the U.S. is saving the day. We're sending more than everybody else combined. We're well over 50%, like we're over 50% than everybody else combined.
Interesting.
What does that actually look like on the front line?
Well, I can't speak for everywhere on the front line. I wasn't everywhere.
In your experience.
In my experience, most of the weapons were European.
I'm sorry?
Most of the weapons were European.
Okay.
We had some 50 cals from France. Our ammunition for the 50 cals was Italian. We had Mark 19 from Turkey. They did have U.S. rounds for those.
What about artillery support? Did you guys have enough artillery support?
No.
What people don't understand about this in particular, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you can laugh about it now. Right?
Yeah, that's funny.
Not
now.
when you don't have it.
No.
Right? So what people don't understand is at one point during the offensive back in 2023,
Yeah.
when they're pushing 2023, yeah, now we're 2025. Sorry,
Yeah.
years drag on.
No, it's, yeah.
When they're pushing hard and they were going, Ukraine was shooting upwards of 7,000 155 shells a day.
Yeah.
We don't produce that many here in the United States of America. People were literally, this is the first war I've actually seen crowdfunding for artillery shells.
Well, we do now. We are making a lot now. Not still
We're
not that much.
making more,
Yeah.
but not enough.
Yeah.
You know, and personal friends of mine recently, and even back when the supply was kind of at its highest, were telling me stories about, look, man, still, I'm moving back from the front, we're getting relieved. I'm moving back from the front and I'm shucking rounds into people's hands out of my magazines so that they can take that ammo forward because they're not moving forward with a full combat load.
Yeah.
Did you experience that?
Maybe not quite that dramatic, but I did have some guys. Like I am a very typical Marine, right? Like I tactically acquire everything. If you leave it laying around, it's mine, right?
Yeah.
Like I figure if I would have left something laying around, I would want to be taught a lesson. So
Exactly.
I'm gonna go ahead and
Yeah,
teach
thank
you that
you.
lesson.
Yeah. Everybody's just trying to get their stuff back, right?
Yeah. So I ended up with like a backpack full of AK magazines, right?
Nice.
Which doing the kind of stuff I was doing primarily, that's not a bad thing to have if they're loaded up anyway. But then people started to figure out, you know, so there was some new guys that were coming up, and I think they were going to the front, had like 4 mags apiece, and you know, for their AKs, no, it's a defensive position. They're not going like storming stuff, but still, like you shouldn't have to be bombing magazines full of rounds in the middle of a gunfight in a defensive position. There should be piles of PMags in there, right? In that defensive position, just so many that if you're done with one, you just throw it on the ground and leave, right?
Going, yeah.
They're cheap. So, but I mean, it does get better, right? Like, it started out at one point you had to go kind of do that kind of stuff and get magazines from like a surplus store, and now, you know, they're as cheap as they are here. But it was just supply and demand at the beginning of it. But yeah, there's times where you'd think, man, we're sending all this stuff. Everybody's got to be super outfitted, and they're not, right? Which goes to illustrate the scale of the conflict, right?
Well, it also
It's huge.
It also goes to like bring to kind of the next point. One, the scale of the conflict, how much is being shot. That people here in the United States, I think even a lot of people over in the EU and around the world don't understand that scale of warfare, like that level of conflict that's never been seen.
You can't unless you see it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And
Like, I don't
even
think
then-
you can tell people
And
enough.
And even then, you know what I mean? There's places that I've been in my life that I stand there and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm extremely small. I have to look up at the sky and like remember that, you know.
Yeah.
And then you look all around the horizon and everything around you is just leveled.
Yeah.
You know, like people here in the United States that don't support Ukraine often cite the corruption. What would be your response looking at that? Because I know what I have to say. I'm not naming any particular elected representatives within the last, couple of years that may or may not have been found with gold bars in their pockets from a particular country over in Africa. But how do you feel about that?
I feel like when you have an organization like Doge that is finding trillions of dollars in improper spending, we have a lot of nerve calling anybody corrupt.
Isn't that shocking, right?
You know what I mean? And it's not to like, we gotta fix your own house. Fix your own house before you start.
Right.
So
There's another level to it, though, that I don't think a lot of people understand, right? And it goes into Ukraine, it goes into the history of Ukraine, Russia's role in Ukraine. Part of the reason Maidan Square even happened in the first place, and we start talking about Russian influence, FSB agents over that are planted inside there and different changes that happen. And I can tell you personal stories of mine for how that goes, right? We were talking at dinner tonight, and you had mentioned hearing about certain supplies that are just kind of held up, or an F-16 mechanic, for example, that magically, and people don't think about this, right? Tell the F-16 mechanic story, and I'm going to do my best to explain it for people.
Okay, so F-16 mechanic, there's not very many of those in Ukraine.
No,
right?
And they're really important.
And they're very valuable. So suddenly, one of the few F-16 mechanics who should be worth his weight in gold gets orders to go to the front and work on tanks instead of F-16s. I'll let you go from there.
That makes it really, really well. So what happens when you go and you start playing these games, everybody thinks of like spy games like Jason Bourne and crap like that. I mean, that's Hollywood.
Yeah.
That's typically not how things are done. When you start looking at E1 effect and you can't take down an F-16, but you have the ability to take out its maintenance personnel,
it's easier.
Things of that nature, it's a lot easier. And it's a lot easier to, give somebody orders or to get them between point A and point B and get them on the front line and get killed than it is to try to convince that guy to go over and freaking, destroy an F-16, right? And so there's that level of corruption. And I don't know if that particular incident was,
right. but it looks shady, right?
It walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing goes when it goes to a lot of stuff over there. And having personal friends, personally served in that country as a member of the United States military, having done a lot of different things inside of that country, opened a nonprofit organization, done a ton over there, right? I went the opposite as you. I got out and I was like, you know what? I kind of want to help some people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You were like, go shoot some Russians. I got it, man. Like, I'm more power to you, bro.
I started out wanting to help people, and then I was like, this is really all I'm good at, I guess.
But it is helping people.
Yeah, in a way.
That's the other thing people don't realize, Some of the happiest, like some of my proudest accomplishments were due to war, but it wasn't war itself. It was the accomplishments that you make, like reopening all girls schools in Afghanistan, liberating villages from ISIS, right? Those help people. And there's certain people in this world that are freaking sheep, and there's certain people that are wolves. And sometimes you have to let the wolves out to go fight the freaking fight, right? It's kind of frustrating to me that people don't see it that way, and they don't understand it. So do not, for 1 second, discount a single thing that you did. What you did matters to a lot of people, right? You affected lives. Those people that you saw locked in basements that saw your face when you opened those doors will never forget you.
Well, I mean, I wasn't the guy that was, you know what I mean? But
when
still,
you
like,
see them, they know your face, trust me. That guy's wife will never forget your face. You made a difference, whether you even realize it or not, and you don't even know how many people's lives you touched going through that. It's freaking nuts. So you spend 3 years of your life doing this. 3 years of your life. And it's not always like that, like you said. There's certain days that are slow. Army, our saying was hurry up and wait.
Yeah,
right.
Same thing. Yeah,
Right.
and then we'd have like rotations back where we're not even on the front, right? Like anywhere near it. So you got time off, and you can be kind of human. You're not sitting there for 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, just blasting away at each other in gunfights. And if you do that, you're not going to live. You're not going to survive that very long.
Nor will your barrel.
No. Yeah, like it's. But people don't understand that. They think that war is just like a constant gunfight all the time.
Right.
And you just it's just not sustainable, even psychologically, right? You couldn't do it. So yeah, I mean, it's not like there was other times where you could actually kind of interact with the normal population of people, right? So
you spend 3 years doing that. Your cousin ends up getting what you called like the shoulder tap, right? Or what, man, hey, I was like, he's moving up. Nobody in Ukraine really knew who you were or what family you're connected to or anything like that.
Yeah.
And you get this idea in your mind like, hey, this probably isn't a good idea for me to be doing this anymore.
Correct.
I don't want to give the Russians propaganda.
Correct.
I also don't want to get my friends killed because I'm over here.
Right.
Because as soon as they figure it out.
Oh, things are coming my way.
A lot of things are coming your way, right? So all of that happened. So you more or less end up becoming a liability
Correct.
just being over there.
Yeah.
And so you make the decision to back out. And you did that in January. Then you get back home. Did you try to reach out then after January when you got back home, or were you just?
No, I didn't want to talk to anybody.
I don't blame you.
I don't want to talk to anybody. So I got back. I did kind of make a promise. The guy kind of, helped me out with some logistics going home, and I agreed to do a podcast in Nashville. So I did that, and then I got to San Antonio, and as soon as I saw San Antonio, I was like, no. And I just got in my truck and drove to the mountains and basically went camping. And that's kind of what I've been doing up until that article was
Been doing what most of us dreamed of doing, right?
Yeah.
Like I just need to decompress and get away.
pretty much, yeah.
Right. And so then you see, number one, it's hard to explain to people what it's like to leave and knowing that your friends are left there.
Yeah, I felt like I didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish, right? So you kind of angry because you feel like a failure because you just didn't.
You get finished.
No, that's exactly right. So.
And your friends are still there.
Correct.
You probably feel like a giant pile of garbage because you had to leave and you were conflicted inside.
Piece of shit, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Right. Guilt, I'm assuming, is also in there.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, no, like that's, I don't know, right? It's not a
hard
good
to
feeling.
explain.
It's not a good feeling, right?
I didn't understand what it was like for a family member, like back here in the United States, until I got med boarded out at almost like 16 years in. And I had to watch my ODA turn around and rotate right back overseas. And I was stuck at home. And knowing what they were doing, knowing where they were at, and then seeing and hearing, right, getting messages of what was happening to them sucks. I hate that. I'm assuming since you've been home, things like that have happened.
Yeah.
Horrible freaking feeling, and I'm not going to ask you to describe it on camera.
No, I won't. Anyway,
I
so.
don't blame you. But for me, it's important that people understand that that exists.
Yeah, no, it's not good. And honestly, I've already been, I think I was back for like 2 weeks and I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to go back over there.
Yeah,
And I was already making plans to go back anyway, but like, just screw it. I don't care who knows.
been there. Yep.
So I found a specific job to do, right? Like, like, so.
So you're going through all of that on the inside. You went through all of that for years to make sure that the Russians don't get, one, that your friends don't get endangered, two, the Russians don't get propaganda. I mean, there's so many layers to what you did, and people don't understand how hard it is to make that decision, and like what you personally go through doing that. And then you're out camping by yourself. You don't have people that you can relate to. You don't have people that you can talk to. You walk down the street in the United States of America, and it's just unfamiliar sometimes, And then the next thing you do, you're kind of like isolated yourself for a reason. And then you hear the news about Zelensky being inside of the White House, and you see that stuff.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
You see, like what I was watching, what I was thinking is that relationship between my friends and their safety is evaporating in front of my face, right? So those guys, right, who, on multiple occasions have put themselves at risk to, get me out. Like we had a vehicle light up fire one time, right? And of course that's a big beacon, and when it's time to leave, somebody's got to come get you, right?
Yeah.
And they're putting themselves at, a lot of personal risk to come get you out of harm's way, right? They don't have to do that. I'm a guest there, right? And I've often thought of like what would happen if there was some conflict in the United States and a bunch of French guys were like, hey, you want us to help train your guys? We'd be like, why don't you go, right off, right? Get away from me, right? We'll take care of this, right? That's not how they were. They were very hospitable and as soon as, just treated me like one of them.
Yeah.
And that's a weird debt to kind of repay, right? So it's never, like you feel like it's never enough.
Sure.
So I see that and I see like the thing that's kind of keeping them alive just kind of evaporating in front of my face, and it's helplessness. and anger, which is my natural reaction to anything I don't like. My immediate natural reaction is to be pissed off and stay that way for
It's really hard to control, and after 3 years in that environment, I don't know anybody that could honestly say that they wouldn't act the same way.
Well, I'm 45. I should have that under better control, but
Yeah, and that's humbleness, right? That's you judging yourself and looking inward,
yeah.
right? But at the same time, I don't think there's an honest human being on this planet that can say, with that entire, and we talked for not that long at this point about the things that you did, and it drew up emotions in me that I don't like,
Yeah.
you know? And it is something different when it's directly impacting your friends and people that you consider family.
Yeah.
And what's worse is you probably felt caught in the middle of it, and then you probably felt like maybe there's a way I can make a difference.
Well, yeah,
right?
you see something like that, and it's like, you know, I use John Wick for example, right? Like you see somebody kick your dog, and you don't do anything about it. What kind of a man are you?
Sure.
Right? So there's just that. It's like it's almost kind of like I have to do something, but in all honesty, I really wasn't even gonna try.
Mm-hmm.
I just got a random phone call from a journalist I had met about a few days after that. I mean, I had no contacts with anybody. I didn't even know how to get in touch with media people, right?
So like the way I understood it, like in the media, the way it looked was that stuff went down and you tried calling his office and they blew you off after
No.
that. And then,
No,
and then
Jesus
you were
Christ.
like, screw this, and I'm going to go like talk to this journalist. I'm going to call him a useful idiot.
It was kind of like a random thing where early on when I was over there in like 2020, I think it might have been the summer of 2022. Yeah, it was. We had a photographer that was kind of following our unit around. And of course I talked to him and made conversation, you know, and all I told him was I was like, hey, I don't want my face posted anywhere, right? Like just don't post my face anywhere. Mm-hmm. And he was respectful of that. And but we had plenty of conversations, and then he was a freelance photographer at the time. And he had gone and gotten a job with La Figaro, and he came back and visited the same unit maybe a week before before he got in touch with me. Mm-hmm. And some of the guys at the unit were like, hey, remember Nate, that American guy? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, isn't it crazy I was cousins of vice president? And he's like,
Oh, he did. He
like,
timed you out.
He's like, what? Right? You know, yeah. So then they called me and they were like, are you willing to talk? And I was, this is when I was pretty much at my maddest.
Sure.
And I was like, yeah. Yes.
Right. Looking back now, right? Looking back now at how that goes and seeing the policies and decisions, like aid got turned back on for Ukraine.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like intel sharing turned back on for Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Things are changing. Do you kind of, I don't know, go back and, you said it, right? But do you kind of wish you could go back and change a thing or two about it, or?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was one statement that I will kind of, I'll die on that hill, you know what I mean?
I don't know what statement you're talking about.
This particular statement, but where it says, just because we're family doesn't mean I'll like sit idly by. If I think you're doing something that's going to get my friends killed, I'm going to say something about it.
That's the value of a man.
Yeah, well, like,
one.
I will, no matter what, right? That's I don't take that back. The useful idiots thing. I was pretty pissed off. I was pretty mad. I got to own it. I said it. But yeah, that is a product of
Right.
anger and a loss of temper and admittedly, a lack of understanding of a lot of things that are probably going on behind closed doors.
And you know what's funny? Like when we were talking yesterday, you had said something that I was like, I completely forgot about that.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, you say it. Like when you're
look,
we're human beings. We're allowed to change our minds.
Yeah, well, we are. So, and it's true, right? Like one of the things, politics is pretty polarizing. Everybody's going to try to find something to, pick you apart or use, right?
Sure.
Twist, spin, and do all that stuff. But one of the things that the electorate does that's bad is we malign politicians for changing their minds. but that's actually the sign of critical thinking.
Weird, isn't it?
Yeah, like if you're just going to parrot what somebody else says or never change your mind, you're not a critical thinker.
You're an idiot.
That's not how it works, right?
If you 100% align with somebody else's views, you're an idiot.
100, yeah.
You are not using your own brain.
Correct.
You and me are never going to see eye to eye on 100% of the subjects. Let's talk about marriages, for example.
Yeah.
Right?
You love that person and you argue with them all the time.
Your best friend in life, and you love them to death. And you mean to tell me that your best friend, your soulmate, you don't see eye to eye with, and yet for some reason a politician you can see eye to eye with.
Batting 1,000 for thinking like you think. Yeah, you're a moron.
Out of here.
So, like, we're allowed to change our mind. I'm allowed to change my mind. JD said some unsavory things about the guy that he works for right now. Right?
Surprise!
He changed his mind.
Right.
Right. I don't know. I don't know what evidence was produced that made him change his mind. It's none of my business because it's his decision. You know what I mean? Like, but
it's almost like he's a grown man allowed.
But
to
he's
make
an
his own
adult,
decisions.
allowed to do what he wants, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're allowed to like say something and then be like, "Hey, now I saw some new evidence that shows me that that's maybe not correct." You should actually be praised for coming out and saying, "Hey, I saw this. I thought 2 + 2 was 5 my whole life, and then somebody came out and showed me that 2 + 2, equals
3.
4. Yeah, well, yeah, math for Marines, you know what I mean? But 2 + 2 is 4, and then you're like, oh, well, now I know, and it's better that I'm willing to change my mind as opposed to just being stubborn and pounding your, you know. So don't get married to your ideas or your maybe like emotional outburst comments, right?
Yeah. So I also, I asked you earlier as well, if you were trained in media or anything of that nature.
No.
No. If you don't mind, I would like to play a short clip from your interview from Erin Burnett. Because in my opinion, she did something a little tricky.
Okay.
Where she asks you a question or she presents something and then throws a question at the end of it, which in my opinion almost makes it look like you agree with some of these things. So if you don't mind, we're going to play this short little clip from your interview with Erin Burnett.
But on this issue of Ukraine, where you have put so much of your life over these past few years, you think your cousin is misguided. How come?
She stated that, do you think your cousin is misguided? And then kind of follows it up with,
how come? So it makes it difficult to answer one question or the other.
Doesn't it though?
It does.
When you do not go through training, when you don't, go ahead.
Now, I'm just going to say, you're right, but, is it tricky? It is. Am I a grown man?
You are.
Yes. Right. And if it makes somebody look bad because the way I answered that question is both of our fault.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're an adult and you own it, right? That wasn't the only one that I found. In that particular interview. We're going to do another one when it goes over what we were talking about trying to reach out to him. Like I said, to us, the rest of America, I assume because you just see those little bits that it's, hey, I didn't like this. And we're going to, well, first let's go ahead and play that clip about you trying to reach out.
I know that you've tried to reach out to your cousin since he took office, but haven't been successful. I mean, what were you planning to say to him? I mean, what do you want to say to him now in this moment?
So when you go back and you hear that now, with all of the context you provided earlier, when she says that little thing, to you, does that sound like you were banging on his office? Is it really in context for what you did at the time you did it or anything of that nature? Do you think that was fair?
No, but I also didn't offer that, you know what I mean? I'm trying to go back. I'm a big proponent of if I.
You own it.
Yeah.
Because you're a man.
I own it. I'm trying to think about what I told them prior to that interview, and did I give them enough information?
How much prep did you have for that interview?
Not very much.
How long did they talk to you before that interview?
They didn't. really. You know what I mean? There was like a brief little conversation, but
So
not
you had
much,
a brief little conversation before you go on national television,
Yeah.
and they throw something out that could affect national policy.
Yeah, Again, though, like, I'm smart enough, should be smart enough to kind of understand that that's their business, is to get the soundbite, right? So
Sure, but guess what? I've got the sound bites too, and there's one more I'm going to play for you, friend. Because if there's one thing your cousin's boss and everybody else in this world hates is shiesty media. And that's why people are, hold on now, because this is one of the ones that is like, here is a statement, and then I'm going to throw something underneath to make it, to me, when I watched it, it was like, wow, that really makes it appear as if he did this. And I've been on camera for years now. When I got used to, before I got used to it, I had to sit there and go back, and there's things that you don't remember. You're trying to analyze, and you're trying to think of a response because you're so worried about everything.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'm going to do one more for you. Okay? One last one, where they talk about, if we don't mind, let's just roll that clip.
I'm thinking of the moment when your cousin, Vice President Vance, publicly reprimanded Ukraine's president, right? It's an unforgettable moment in the Oval Office when your cousin's sitting on the couch and Zelensky is next to Trump sitting in those chairs. Let me just play it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
J.D. Vance was widely seen as the instigator, in that moment, right? When he got it, you should show appreciation, and he was angry.
Yeah.
You obviously have known him his whole life. Did it surprise you, the way he acted in that moment?
But seen as the instigator, did that surprise you? In reference to when Zelensky was in the White House, the VP seemed like the instigator in that situation. Did that surprise you? And that's kind of where it led.
Yeah.
That, to me, is one of those things that is just frustrating. And you said something on the backside, which is understandable, giving the context of everything you had, were able to describe. We've only been doing this for less than 1 hour, by the way. We're 57 minutes or something. Your answer was, it was disappointing to see it.
Yeah.
Not, I hate that man.
I don't.
I disagree. It was disappointing.
Yeah.
And now, looking back and understanding, it's frustrating to me. I think it's frustrating to me. I don't know, brother. Go ahead. You're welcome to address it. That was number 3 in that short 7-minute segment that I felt like addressing.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you that they are tricky, right, with their wording and kind of how they can, because, if you answer it, it could be spun. The question's got multiple points in it, so it could be spun off of those things. And I get it, but, I do need to hold my own feet to the fire and say, well, then I shouldn't be going on national television unless I'm prepared.
And you're a grown man.
Yeah, so that's ultimately the ultimate takeaway from that is if I'm not prepared to pick out those things on the fly and know how to respond to them, then I should keep my ass off of national television. So it's true. I mean, it's true. And I don't know, I'm always more apt to blame myself than anybody else. That's one thing I learned at work. If you screw it up, just say you screw it up so we don't have to keep looking for the mystery culprit when you're like, oh no, dude.
Or just own it so you can have respect and move on with your life. Because
fucking extra gravity happened over here for some random reason, and then I dropped it, and my dog died last week, so shut up, dude. You screwed it up. Own it.
Or there's one thing that I like to say, one human being, well, technically no, but that ever walked the face of this earth, right, to be perfect. And in my belief,
it's Jesus.
It's Jesus.
Yeah. I said that on another podcast.
It's not you. It's not me. It's nobody else in this
world.
world.
Trust me, I'm not him.
And people make mistakes.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, that happens.
No, we're fallible, but
exactly.
But it's I think a lot of times nowadays people are so afraid of accountability.
It's sad.
That they never get better.
It's sad.
Yeah. I think that's how you improve yourself, is just by saying that, okay, this is where I suck.
I made a mistake.
Yeah.
Right?
Don't do it again.
now that you're like, I don't know, like that, from what I call like from like flashbang or whatever, right?
Yeah.
From when that happened to where we're at today, like, has your stance on any of the policies, decisions, anything like that towards you, like any, like?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, my only goal in any of this, you know, is to make sure those guys that are still in those trenches have the things they need and the ability, you know, every ability they can to get home, right? So nobody has to look at a woman in a coffee shop with that look in her eyes, right? That you know, less of that, right? And I know it's not going to go away completely.
Like, is it fair to say that you want people to stop dying?
100%, I do, but like, and this is where Americans don't quite maybe understand the region, right?
Sure.
And of course, I want people to stop dying. I'm glad that there's this, you know, that the offer of this 30-day ceasefire is on the table. I think I know what they're doing with it.
Sure.
I think I know what the result of it's going to be.
Sure.
Right?
Well, it's like we're going to talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah. But, you know, if you say, hey, let's stop shooting at each other so the enemy can come back in 5 years, and it's almost 100% guaranteed they're going to come back in 5 years and be stronger and then kill your kids, right? Your kids are going to have to fight these people, you know, 5 years from now. No, I'll just kill them now, right? So, but I think Americans don't understand how long this conflict has actually been going on, and it's actually far older than 2014. It's way older than 2022. Some people think it started in 2014. It started before that, right? The initial stages, the psychological operation started way before that.
You don't get to 2014
Unless you've already
things
been
prior.
Yep.
It didn't show up overnight.
Exactly, right? So people don't understand that here, and they don't understand just how aggressive and determined the enemy is. So when you see Ukrainians being like, no, right, I'm not going to yield, I'd rather keep fighting. I don't want to, right? I don't want to do it, but my enemy's at the weakest right now that they will ever be, and I'm not going to give them a chance to, you know, come back. If you understand the region, you understand, like Zelensky's being like, I can't tell these people to stop, right? You know what I mean? There's got to be something there that prevents the Russians from continuing to be aggressive, or these people are like the Ukrainian people are so fed up that,
Sure.
you know.
But it's to the point, like, I can see myself in, you know, Trump and you know, JD's position of just being like, man, crap, you know, and I can see myself in Zelensky's position. And I, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't want to be either of their shoes, having to make those decisions, because you're literally talking about decisions that
There's no easy solution.
one word can change millions of lives.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah.
It's not a good spot to be in.
No, and it's not. That's one thing too. Like, I've had enough conversations with Ukrainians that were struggling through their English, right, to know that some of what was said in that meeting that was perceived as disrespectful was in no way intended to be disrespectful.
Sure. Yeah, we laughed about it at dinner.
Yeah, like the tone of voice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and think of it this way: like, New Yorkers sometimes listen to people from the South and think they're stupid, right? Some of the smartest people I know sound like absolute rednecks, right?
Sure.
Like PhDs in embryology and, you know, like crazy stuff. And if you listen to him order a cheeseburger, you'd be like, that guy probably changes oil at Jiffy Lube down the street, right? You'd think he was just some southern country bumpkin.
So it'll make you
right?
an idiot.
Yeah, brilliant. So sometimes that accent, that like Slavic accent, when people are speaking it in English, they say things and they're like genuinely asking a question, and it sounds like they're being like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
It sounds
No, that's actually true. Like, it's a very, like...
It sounds like almost aggressive and hostile and condescending, you know.
Yeah.
And there's that tone to it. It's like, what do you mean by this? What do you mean? And he's genuinely saying, like, I don't understand.
When I was learning Russian, I was shocked at a bunch of the different, like, ways that you could, like, but it sounds like an aggressive language. Now, he speaks Ukrainian and several other, but... you know what I'm saying? It's a Slavic language.
Learned Ukrainian and then spoke English. He's on his third language.
Correct.
Yeah.
And most people can't even, barely speak one.
Yeah, I can
We've
say,
got
like,
a lot of Americans that can't even speak proper English.
I can say like hola,
¿Cómo está?
Yeah, and then a few cuss words in Ukrainian, but or actually Russian curse words.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back and watching that. But that's how delicate I think diplomacy can be sometimes. Is that you even misinterpret the tone of someone's third language, and you're like, is that disrespectful? But honestly, sometimes it's better to like it's okay to just say, maybe we need to take a break. And then you come back and you kind of figure it out. Because I had that happen to me too in Ukraine. Like guys would ask me questions and I'm like, are you pissed at me or what?
Yeah.
So there's some of that happened in that meeting, but maybe, right? Maybe. And I'm still I'm trying to do that thing where I'm trying to get into people's heads, which everybody does.
Which is horrible.
Yeah.
Because there's things that you don't see off camera, there's things that you see on camera, there's a million other things that go into it. The talks that take place behind everything, like I have no idea what happened, but like that very well could have been warranted. I don't know. Could have been.
I don't know.
But there's also politics that go into things.
I don't know.
And maybe there's things, but what I look for, right, like at the end of the day, is
what's the end result now?
Yeah, end result. So when I look at things at the end of the day, like when we were in the infantry, we had commander's intent.
Yeah.
If this entire mission, because no plan survives first contact, what is our goal? What do we want to achieve? And outside breaking every rule in the stay in the gray, don't go into black, right? But get this done at the end of the day. And if that's done, that's what matters to me.
No, 100%. Yeah.
Right.
100%. So, yeah, I mean, it's natural, I think, to try to just almost like a play-by-play.
Right.
Right. You try to break it down and be like, what was this? But, honestly, watching it that's after I had time to be like, all right, calm down.
It's hard to do, yeah.
And then go back and like watch. I was actually watching your video where you broke it down. That's what it's talking about.
Yeah. Well, I wrote on your cousin and I wrote on Zelensky.
Well, yeah. Nobody's perfect though. That's the point, right?
Right.
Like, nobody's
I was like, screw that guy and screw that guy.
Yeah.
But there's a.
Yeah, but going back and watching it is like a different perspective. But when you see when you initially see, like I was getting messages like, hey, did you see what happened in the White House today?
Right.
And I'm like, oh God. So I go look, and I was actually driving, and I was like watching it and trying to drive at the same time, and I was like, God damn it, man. And that's another thing, like La Figure. I think this is another thing with translations. I think the French language is like much more flowery than English.
Yep.
And then when you translate it, it makes it even worse.
Yep.
So like, in that article, it was funny. It was like, and then he flew into a rage. Now, I don't know. His name's Stan, is the guy who wrote it. He's a nice guy, but I don't know what he thinks flew into a rage means. But what I think flew into a rage means involves police officers.
That's
afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Flew into a rage is like.
It went out of control.
But yeah, it's bad, right? So that's some of those things that I think too. Probably unfortunate on my part. Again, if I don't kind of know how to navigate the media, then I should shut up.
Yeah, it's one of the things, right?
Yeah.
Huh? Welcome to the club.
I don't want to shut up.
We all, it is what it is. Well, and you don't have to either, right? Like, we're going to be talking again tomorrow.
Yeah.
We haven't really quite yet decided if we're doing it at 9 a.m. or another evening stream yet, but we'll talk about that. We'll make those announcements. And
Ask.
I'm sorry?
Ask what people would prefer.
We can do that. I've got a great place to do that,
Yeah.
so we can do that. But, dude, I want to appreciate you for your time today. I want to appreciate you for coming out. Like, not a lot of people have the cojones to do what you have, done in your life, both for the United States government and for a foreign government, just standing up and quite literally putting your life on the line for what you think is right. Number two, you're a hell of a man. Like, I'm happy to know you. It's a pleasure to know you. So I appreciate everything that you've done.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm that big of a deal, but apparently the goddamn media does.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
So, but no, I appreciate you having me. It's good. I know I did. It's a weird thing to be on, like a pretty Republican your whole life.
So I started off Republican, and then like we talked about earlier, you're an idiot if you go with one set of beliefs. So I tend to lean Republican, but I'm all about the Constitution. You know, there's some things.
I'd say like I'm a Republican leaning independent if you had to break it down, but.
I'm an independent leaning Republican, but I also have things I look at that are extremely Democratic. Democrat, you know, and so, you know, there's some stances that, you know, Trump's made in the past about the 2A that I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah.
Right. There is, I mean, there's lots of things I can point to.
It's just weird. It's a weird feeling to be like the first time you ever talk to a newspaper, pretty much the entire group of people that you've aligned yourself with your, like, for the most part of your entire life, hate my guts, right? You know what I mean? They're like, you son of a, you know.
Yeah, welcome back to America, man.
Yeah. But it's weird. It's a weird thing because, and that's the other thing is that, you know, I know damn well if I'm lucid and not angry, most of the media is left-leaning,
Sure.
with a few exceptions, and I know damn well they will use, you know, they'll use me to make Donald Trump and, you know, that administration uncomfortable until I'm of no more use.
Yeah.
And then they'll just be like,
Cheer you up, spit you out.
no, 100%. Right? I know that, but I'm also trying to, the stuff that we'll talk about tomorrow is I'm willing to be used, I guess, as long as it leads to the account, like you said, what's the commander's intent?
Well, that's the other thing. It's like commander's intent, but I also think that right now at this point in history, like as Americans, as we look at things, there's a lot of people that are trying to, like every single issue, for somehow.
Polarize it, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every single thing's polarized. Every single thing is a political issue, and every single thing's polarized. And
Yeah.
to me, as American, I look at things and I vote based on what I believe is going to be best for the United States of America and who is going to uphold the Constitution to the best of their ability. And that's
Yeah.
why your cousin and President Trump got my vote on this go round, along with national security.
Yeah.
I view what's taking place in the Middle East as one of the most existential threats to the United States right now.
Yeah.
Personally, with the rise of Giuliani, he wants a Sunni Islamic caliphate. He just took over Syria. He used to be friends with Baghdadi, which,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
your brother's boss, or I'm sorry, your cousin's boss, and
Yeah.
Schwacken back in the day. I'm pretty freaking thrilled about that.
Yeah.
Right? And now we get another one. So that stuff matters to me.
Yeah, I know, 100%.
And
I get it. I get it. And it's, you know, it's one of those things where, in a sense, probably naively on my part, I'm like, I know that the media will use me for a tagline, right? But if being used means I get to accomplish the things I think you and I both have kind of somewhat discussed off
Yeah.
camera, if it gets that accomplished, then, you know, but, you know, things can get spun so easily that I probably need to take a different approach. So,
Yeah. Well,
So-
if you're not learning, you're not growing, right? And
Yeah.
you're human. So, yeah, no worries, brother. I want to appreciate you for coming on. And we're going to be back tomorrow. Don't worry about it.
yeah.
All right. And it's going to be great. For everybody that's over there watching at home, I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. And we will be back tomorrow. So look forward to that. If you guys aren't following me over on X or you're not following this particular YouTube channel or Twitter account, make sure that you guys are doing that. You'll get all of the latest announcements.